story may be disturbing to hear. There are now criminal charges in that deadly motel shooting.
And the prosecutors say a man killed his girlfriend in a motel room and casually walked away. Blake is in the newsroom.
On January 14th, 2026, a motel worker at the Port Motel in Milwaukee walked into room after room, doing the usual rounds. But when they opened one particular door that Tuesday afternoon, they found something that would shake them forever. Lying on the bed was 29-year-old Alicia Machnik, a mother of two, with a single gunshot wound to her head. She was gone. If you're new here and you love diving deep into the darkest corners of true crime, do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and click that bell icon so you never miss when Shadow Crime drops a new case. Trust me, you're going to want to stay with us on this one. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at someone's relationship and thought, something's not right here? Maybe you couldn't put your finger on it, but you just knew. That's exactly what Alicia's family was feeling in the months leading up to her death. Because about a year before she was found in that motel room, Alicia had married a man named Devon White. He was 29, same age as her. And from the moment they got together, people who loved Alicia started noticing changes. Her mother would later tell investigators that Alicia had completely spiraled out of control since marrying Lance. The daughter she knew, the mother who cared for her two children, seemed to be slipping away. And here's where it gets even more complicated. Alicia had another man in her life, a boyfriend she'd been seeing on and off for 5 years. This man told police he knew Alicia was staying in motels with Lance, and he'd been sending her money regularly. So you got this triangle, this messy situation where Alicia's caught between two men, living in cheap motels, and her family watching helplessly as she falls deeper into something they can't pull her out of. But there's one detail that really tells you how intense things had gotten between Alicia and Lance. She had tattooed his name on her face. Think about that for a second. Your face. The first thing people see when they look at you. That's not just commitment. That's something else entirely. That's marking yourself permanently for someone. And according to what Lance would later tell police, that tattoo will become significant in the worst possible way. Let's rewind to January 12th, 2 days before Alicia's body was discovered. Surveillance cameras at the Port Motel captured Alicia and Lance checking in together. 2 days. They had 2 days in that room together. What were they doing? What were they talking about? Because whatever happened in those 48 hours would end with Alicia dead and Lance running.
This next story may be disturbing to hear. There are now criminal charges in that deadly motel shooting.
And the prosecutors say a man killed his girlfriend in a motel room and casually walked away. Blake is in the newsroom with a criminal complaint from this case. Blake, the suspect, according to the document, made a very graphic confession.
Yeah, that's right, guys. Stunning new details revealed today in this criminal complaint. A warning, though, the following details may be disturbing to hear. 29-year-old mother Alicia Machnik was shot dead inside the Port Motel on Appleton Avenue last Wednesday. Today, prosecutors charged her boyfriend, Lance White, with first-degree intentional homicide. The criminal complaint includes a surveillance image that shows a man leaving the motel room they were staying in on Wednesday. Investigators say White identified himself as the man in this image. The complaint says White told investigators he and Machnik were getting high together. It goes on to say White said Machnik told him that her child's father was getting out of prison in 11 months and was going to kill them. So she told him to shoot her at the spot his name is tattooed on her face. White says he shot her in the head once, then left in shock and got rid of the gun in a sewer. Family says Machnik leaves behind a young son.
Blake Eason with those details in this criminal complaint on that motel murder here at 4.
The morning of January 14th started like any other day at the motel. A worker knocked on their door, had a brief conversation with Alicia. She seemed fine. She was alive. But shortly after that interaction, surveillance footage caught something crucial. Lance White walking out of that room. Just walking out, leaving the building. And when police would later piece together the timeline, they realized that was right around the time Alicia was shot. Now, here's where I need you to really think about this with me. At 2:38 that afternoon, when the motel worker found Alicia's body on that bed, she had a gunshot wound to her upper right forehead. The bullet had exited through the back of her head. Investigators found a 9mm cartridge casing in the room and a bloody bullet. This was close range. This was personal. And the spot where that bullet entered? Right where Lance's name was tattooed on her face. When police tracked Lance down and brought him in for questioning, what he told them was absolutely chilling. He said Alicia asked him to do it, that she begged him to shoot her right there on that tattoo, right where his name was permanently marked on her skin. He claimed she was terrified because the father of one of her children was getting out of prison in 11 months, and she believed this man would kill both her and Lance. So according to Lance, shooting her was mercy. It was what she wanted. But hold on. Let's look at what investigators actually found, because this is where Lance's story starts falling apart. After allegedly shooting Alicia, Lance didn't call 911. He didn't stay with her body. He didn't try to explain to anyone what happened. Instead, he ran. He threw the gun into a sewer. He tried checking into another motel, but got turned away because he didn't have ID. And you know why he didn't have ID? Because he left everything behind in that room with Alicia. His identification, his birth certificate, his debit card, his social security card. Everything that proves who you are, he abandoned next to her body. Does that sound like someone who just fulfilled a desperate woman's final wish? Or does it sound like someone who panicked after doing something terrible? And there's more that doesn't add up. Uber records from Alicia's phone showed she took several rides on January 14th. One of those rides dropped her off near Lance's mother's home around 3:45 in the afternoon. But wait, Alicia was already dead by 2:38 when her body was discovered. So either those records are wrong, or something else was going on that we don't fully understand yet.
Prosecutors say it was an execution. A man appeared in court today, charged with shooting and killing his wife at a Milwaukee motel. Our Bill Miston was there, as was the victim's family.
Lance White is charged with first-degree intentional homicide in the death of Alicia Machnik. As White walked into court today, Machnik's family cursed him out from the gallery. The 29-year-old Machnik was found in a room at the Port Motel near 97th and Appleton last week, shot in the head. Surveillance video showed White and Machnik checking into the motel a couple days before. And the day Machnik was found dead, video showed White leaving the room, and no one else was seen going in or out until Machnik was found. Filings say White later showed up to his mother's house looking disheveled and dirty. She drove him to St. Luke's, where he was later arrested by police. In an interview, filings say White said he and Machnik stayed in motels and were, quote, getting high together when she told him to shoot her, allegedly because she was afraid of her child's father, who was getting out of prison within the year. Filings say White admitted to shooting Machnik and fled the room in shock.
If the allegations are true, if it's true you gave a statement saying what you said out of respect for the family, I'm not going to repeat what you said. Then you point blank shot someone intentionally, which would be an execution.
A commissioner set White's bond at $300,000. He's due back in court next week. In Milwaukee, Bill Miston, Fox 6 News.
Let me paint a picture of who Lance White really was, because understanding it might help us understand what actually happened in that motel room. This wasn't just some random guy Alicia met. This was someone she married, someone whose name she wore on her face for the world to see. But what kind of man convinces a woman to do that? What kind of relationship were they really in? The people closest to Alicia saw red flags everywhere. Her family watched her change completely after getting involved with Lance. The woman who used to care for her 2 kids, who had her life somewhat together, suddenly she's bouncing between motels, dependent on money from her ex-boyfriend, and completely consumed by this relationship with Lance. That's not love. That's control. Think about the psychology here for a minute. When someone tattoos your name on their face, what does that give you? Power. Total power. She can't hide that relationship from anyone. Every time she looks in the mirror, she sees his name. Every time someone looks at her, they see his claim on her. And now Lance is telling police she asked him to shoot her right on that exact spot? Come on. That's not poetic. That's sinister. When Lance appeared in court on January 21st, just a week after Alicia's death, the commissioner said something that really stuck with me. He looked at Lance and said, if the allegations are true, you pointed a gun at someone and shot them point blank, intentionally. That would be an execution. An execution. Not assisted suicide. Not a mercy killing. An execution. And they set his bond at $300,000 because they knew exactly what this looked like. The prosecution charged him with first-degree intentional homicide. You know what that means? That means they believe Lance planned this, that he intended to kill Alicia. If they believed his story about her begging him to do it, they would have charged him differently. Maybe second degree, maybe even assisted suicide, depending on Wisconsin law. But first-degree intentional? That tells you everything about what they think really happened in that room. So what was actually going on at the Port Motel during those 2 days? I've got some theories, and I want you to think about these with me. Maybe Alicia was trying to leave Lance. Maybe she told him it was over, and he couldn't handle losing that control over her. Maybe that's why his belongings were left behind. He wasn't thinking clearly. He was acting out of rage. Or maybe, and this is darker, maybe Lance had been planning this for a while. Maybe he knew about the money her boyfriend was sending. Maybe he knew about her complicated life, her fears about her child's father getting out of prison, and he used all of that to manipulate her, to isolate her, to make her feel like she had no way out except through him. There's another possibility we need to consider, and it's one that keeps me up at night thinking about this case. What if Lance had convinced Alicia that they were going to die together? What if he sold her some twisted Romeo and Juliet story, told her they'd escape this world together because of all the threats she feared, and then he shot her and chickened out when it was his turn? That would explain why he seemed so disorganized afterward, why he left all his identification behind. Maybe he was supposed to die too, but his survival instinct kicked in and he ran instead. But here's what we know for certain. Alicia Machnik didn't pull that trigger. Lance White did. Whether she asked him to or not, whether she was manipulated into thinking death was her only option, whether she was trying to leave him and he snapped, the fact remains that he made the choice to aim that gun at her forehead and fire. He made the choice to throw the weapon in a sewer. He made the choice to run instead of calling for help. And now 2 children don't have their mother. A family is left with questions that may never be fully answered. Because even if this case goes to trial, even if Lance testifies, even if we hear every detail of what happened in that room, we'll never really know the complete truth. Alicia's version died with her on that motel bed. As of right now, Lance White is facing life in prison if convicted. He's being held on that $300,000 bond, and his case is moving through the Milwaukee court system. The next hearings are scheduled, and prosecutors are building their case against him. They're not buying the story that this was a mercy killing. They're treating this exactly like what it appears to be a homicide. So let me leave you with some questions, because this case raises so many psychological issues that we need to talk about. What makes someone stay in a relationship so toxic that they permanently mark their face with their partner's name? At what point does love become obsession, and obsession become danger? How many red flags do we ignore when we watch someone we love spiral downward? And maybe the biggest question of all, can we ever really know what happens behind closed doors, or in this case, in a locked motel room, between 2 people when one of them ends up dead and the other is the only one left to tell the story? If this case got you thinking, if it made you feel something, I need you to do something for me right now. Leave a comment below telling me what you think really happened in that room. Do you believe Lance's story that Alicia asked him to shoot her, or do you think this was cold-blooded murder? Share this video because cases like this need attention. These victims need their stories told. And make sure you're subscribed to Shadow Crime with that bell icon turned on, because we're going to follow this case all the way through the trial, and you're going to want those updates. Alicia Machnik deserved better than dying alone in a cheap motel room. She deserved better than whatever that relationship was. And she deserves justice. Let's make sure her story isn't forgotten.